Yeah,
Okay, how are
crossover
you?
episode.
Yes. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty well. Honestly, things are good. How about you?
Pretty good. We did a heavy stream today, so we're gonna end hopefully on a lighter note today with you. We'll be good.
Our stream was pretty heavy too. What were y'all talking about?
We were talking about a YouTuber who had 7 women come forward with allegations of like pregnancy and miscarriage and just the whole thing. And then we talked about Reggie Watts, who's trending right now, in relation to his ex,
All right.
and so we just a lot of stuff. But actually, I guess it kind of relates to what I wanted to talk to you about. So there you go.
Oh,
I mean, life is hard. Life is hard out here. But I noticed that in one of your last streams, you, like I always do as well, talk to my chat about like, what am I doing on the internet? What is the point? Like, what is the great stuff about our work? But also, um, you know, figuring out like, how do I incorporate the tools that we've learned? How do I explain to my audience that at the end of the day, this stream is a tool gathering place to take back to your real life, because this isn't where things happen, like this is where this is where you learn about things happening. So take it back to where things are happening. And so I wanted to talk to you about
yeah.
that today. How do you, to talk about the tools that you've, utilized and brought into your life, and how do they show up in your real
Yeah.
life off a stream?
This is a great question. Um, I'm first just going to quickly pin your link in my chat,
Okay, thank you.
and that gives me also a little extra time to stew on the question because I have a lot of thoughts on it. And I have a feeling, right, that you're asking this in part um out of probably the same, like we're probably like in a similar place right now in terms of what we're doing with our work, where it's like, what is this that we're doing, and like how do we not get caught up in the machine of it,
Mm,
while maintaining that this is some sort of work or some sort of career. Because I, you know thankfully, for one, I have an amazing partner who is my amazing, like, everything partner, who is a partner for my work. Um, and they and I have conversations all the time. Her pronouns are she, they.
okay.
And we are constantly thinking about applying ideas, and we're constantly thinking about embodying what we talk about, embodying something that is decolonial rather than just talking about it, right? And
Mm,
just, there's a feeling that we can get sometimes, maybe I'm speaking for myself, um, that you look, and a lot of people that occupy these spaces on social media are kind of just like saying what sounds right, but there's a feeling that's missing about whether or not they actually believe in what they're saying. And I think people are quite paranoid about this, actually,
yeah.
um, because it is so real, it is so pungent. Like, people have the performative conversation, and it's about this. People have the, you know, oh, fake leftists or whatever idea, or grifting and whatever idea, and it's about this same kind of paranoia. And I think part of the problem is that, and this is relating also to the conversation that we just had, which is about white gay men being fascists. Not all of them,
Leo
obviously, but
Skepi,
like certain
right?
white. We touched on Leo Skepi. We also talked on this Matt Matthews person,
Mm-hmm.
um, who recently went viral for saying, "Oh, we don't do pronouns, whatever." Um, we had this debate about whether or not these folks actually believe what they're saying, and my essential view that I've developed very recently, actually, and something that comes from a philosophy book that I'm reading,
Mm,
is essentially that, like, colonization is inherently irrational, and it's inherently an imposition of an irrational belief onto people. It's you can't force people to believe something, and if you're trying to force people to believe something, it's probably because it doesn't make any sense. Because why else? Like, if I believe that I was Jesus Christ incarnate, and I truly believe that in the bottom of my soul, why would I need to be spending time like telling other people that, like forcing people to believe that? Like, I
mm.
can tell them what I think, but why would I need to like resort to violence or resort to bullying or resort to anything to make them believe that? And so what that means is, for me, these ideas we are inculcated with so many ideas that are irrational, that come back to that colonialism, that come back to those colonial ideals. And if you don't unpack them, you live kind of miserably, right? Like I don't I think people underestimate just how miserable it is to get what you want when your desires have been shaped by something so fundamentally irrational. Like, if I got what I wanted when I was 13, I would not be happy. Because when I was 13 or 14, I was like, yeah, I just want to be a rich and famous rapper child star, and I want to, have XYZ relationship with women, XYZ relationship with my sociality or whatever. And like, I'm so glad that didn't happen. Like, I'm so glad that that didn't happen. And I think that that's a perfect example of why the work can feel so hard and so uncomfortable, is that you are constantly fighting against your desires, because you know that at the end of the day, at least some of those desires, if not most of them, are going to be coming from a place that is completely irrational. So I won't go on longer, but because I feel like I've had a hard time not being long-winded today. But what would you, yeah, what else did you want to ask?
I feel like I'm ready. I got a bunch of notes. Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there's so much here. So just to introduce myself to your audience too. So over on my channel, we do philosophy through pop culture. And I've been on the internet a long time, and very messy versions of me have been on the internet. And I'm glad none of those people got their dream. Like, genuinely. This version here got hers, though. And this dream that I get to do now is show up every day and incorporate philosophical, ethical frameworks against the media that we are consuming and against the script that we are being fed, and trying to discern where does our philosophical joy land us as individuals and as collectives, and when are we engaging in philosophical evil? So like out of sync with your joy, right? That's what that means. And I really think this plays into so much of what my community and we call like embodied values, because I think a lot of people highly intellectualize. Have you heard this about autistic people? Or neurodivergent people? They'll go into therapy and highly intellectualize their diagnosis or their trauma, and the therapist is like, oh, you already got it figured out. But like, what good is your self-awareness without introspection, right? So they need to feel their feelings, though. So I think a lot of these people, when I'm debating, is this a grifter, or is this just like a uneducated or ill-intended or mistaken or ignorant or naive or something person? It's all about like, how embodied is this value? To be honest, like, this is where I always struggle when I talk about it. No matter who I talk about, is like, I'm always trying to discern, okay, is this person like, is this like, do I understand where they're coming from? Like, when I watch your content, I believe I have an understanding of where the person that I'm seeing on screen, Elliot, I think I know what they're advocating for. I think I understand him. I think I think I get it. Maybe I don't understand you intimately or personally or something like this, but I think I believe you. And I believe you because I think it feels very embodied. Versus I watch other people and I'm like, I don't see how you as a consciousness have these values, because they don't feel embodied. And I think that is the struggle, because I don't think, at least for me growing up, even though I grew up in a very religious home, I would not say a lot of the values were embodied, by people. I would say that they attempted to embody what they could, but the truth is like, it's really hard. I always say it's really hard to be a good person. I think we take it for granted that we might even think we are one. But I think that it takes a lot of work to unlearn and reincorporate at the same time. So unlearning the things that you've learned that weren't good for us, and then reincorporating better things into our lives when we read a good book, when we watch a good documentary, when we hear somebody on YouTube say something that really gives us a bubble pop, right? So I think there's so much here, but this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I feel like this job, I always tell my audience, like, look, you think I couldn't have been drama with YouTubers? You think I couldn't have gotten rich and paid for a house off the drama I could create with these YouTubers? I just feel like I'd be so good at it. But how am I supposed to do that and be within my philosophical joy? I don't think it's possible, And so, Dr. Ball often says that you can't be rich, famous, and a radical at the same time. And I deeply believe this. And I'm trying to be radical in my love, radical in my philosophy, radical in my love of people and my belief that we're not the center of the universe, but rather we're here to have a good relationship with, each other and others and everything outside of ourselves. So I think that plays a big role in why this job can be very difficult when you're genuine and when you're a leftist. Because I do think that is actually the key component here. If we were liberals, I think it'd be easier.
Yeah.
Oh,
for sure.
First, they're allowed to be capitalists. So that's number one. Okay, so easy. I'll make money.
So easy.
Getting beef, make money, part of the game. And then on top of that, there's all these other layers. But yeah, I think it's just hard because we're in that marginalized. And I want to remind everybody, because I think my audience takes it for granted how much work they have done to be this person, when the rest of the world is still figuring it out. And why wouldn't they be? They're all going through things. It's very hard to take the time to, I would say that, okay, I'll just say this, then I'll give it back to you, but talk about long-winded. I would say that it is a part of my brain that I get to love reading books as much as I do, or watching videos as much as I do. And I can't assume everyone has that brain. And, to assume that would then assume that everyone spends their free time reading, when most people just want to spend their free time vibing. And how can I blame them for that? I love to vibe. It's a great pastime. But I try to be very compassionate with the fact that people don't know. When Leo Skepi was first introduced to me, my audience said, Brittany, he reminds me of you. And I was like, oh! I was so offended. I was like, how could you say this to me? I'm going to cry. And by the way, one of my best performing videos I have on my second channel is When You're Gay But Not Queer. And it highlights Leo Skepi, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. When You're Gay But Not Queer, Leo Skepi, Ariel Scarcella, Jeffree Star, all of them. It's like, they're part of the community, but they're on the other side of the community, Anyways, okay, thoughts?
Yeah. So I have so many thoughts that this is going to come through as it's going to feel like a series of revelations almost.
Okay, you do that. I'm going to turn off my camera to blow my nose.
Okay. I'm going to pretend I don't notice. No, I'm just kidding. The first thing, if you don't mind me asking, is how long you've been doing this, basically making content.
I'm 37.
If you don't want to say, you don't...
No. I'm 37, and I think I started my YouTube channel when I was 19.
Okay, so I was going to say, first and foremost, that I'm pretty sure I used to watch some of your videos when I was in high school. When I was in Santo Domingo, I am pretty sure I was I have a fairly vivid but blurry memory of being in my living room in Santo Domingo, and I would watch FIFA videos, FIFA career mode videos, and then there were a couple videos by Brittany Simon I would watch, and I just remember being like, "Oh, this person seems cool," and then, without saying too much, I did end up being like, "Where did those videos disappear? Would I imagine that?" So you mentioning before that you were I've been at this for a long time, versions of you, etc., etc. I was following this up, because this does also feel to me it does feel to me like kind of a big moment for me in that way.
Yeah. Anyway, oh my gosh. Okay. Well, sorry for past Elliot finding my past content, but welcome to present Elliot. I'm glad we reconnected at this stage of my life.
Right. Me too. Because past Elliot also put out YouTube videos, and I'm very glad that nobody saw those at that same time. But I was also going to say about that is that, because we've been doing this for so long, I was doing it at that time. I started trying to make YouTube videos when I was 12.
Oh my gosh, cute.
I'm almost 30 now. And you go through, you see YouTube change. You see algorithms change. You see what people want to change. You see rises and falls. You see also values change, and you also, I started from this place where it's I do want good things to happen in the world. I do care about when bad things happen. I do care about war and stuff like that. But I also, want to show off this cool remix of this Drake song, or whatever. And you're kind of trying to figure out what's the way that I can connect with this. And it took so long for me. I think because when you are trying to do it from a genuine place, there is already so much of that internal work that happens over and over again, and it can feel like a curse. It can
Mm.
feel like, oh shit, it's just not happening. Like, what the fuck? Um, and I think, especially like, um, when you mentioned the idea of being embodied, like me and Nelly, my partner, were talking about that idea a while ago. Nelly would bring this up. It's just like it's not embodied. And it would be a lot of times about just like things in our relationship or things in my life. Like
Mm.
there were things I aspired to or things that I thought, and then it's just like, but then why do you behave like this? And so over the past couple of years, I have gone through so much like churning myself in and out, like a grinding myself over, like in this difficult process of like I can't let myself go back into this habit. I can't let myself go back into this habit. I have to push myself to have this habit.
Mm.
And it can feel for a while like it's going to be like that forever and you're not going to survive because it's like so exhausting in a certain sense. But then at a certain point you make a realization that it's like, oh, I'm so glad that I've been doing this, not just because of where I'm at now, but I'm so glad that that was what I was going through and not what other people are going through, right? Like what they were
Definitely.
going through and what they are going through. Like I would hate to be in the position of, since we brought him out like a Leo Skeppy, I would hate to be in that position. Um, Without saying too much, just because like even the idea of being approved of by so many people is not appealing to me anymore.
Mm. Mm.
Um, it only would appeal to me if we're all connected with something that is external, that is extrinsic to me, and something that is important to me. It wouldn't be, oh, I'm an influencer, you know?
Right.
So
No.
if somebody who's in a position of being a celebrity or an influencer, even if they're not so clearly like ignorant or bigoted about certain things, like that's just a horrible. I would hate to be in Tom Holland's position, Zendaya's
Mm-mm.
position. I'd
Mm-mm.
hate to be in Kendrick Lamar's position, like, and so because of that, I've also finally reached this place, and I think part of this is also just like a little bit of plant medicine work, a little bit of like people don't realize how much of this is physical.
Oh.
Like I actually think the embodied thing is perfect for this. This is like I don't even just mean like, oh, I'm sitting in a chair and talking for three
Mm-hmm.
hours. Like, oh, how exhausting. I mean, it is tiring, but literally to live by certain values requires you're in tune with your body. Like that's where also what people get so wrong when it comes to like the exclusion of disabled people and
Mm.
conversations about fitness and health, because it's like it's really just about being in tune with what you are and what you have going on, regardless of what's there. And when you're in tune, then like science has already taught us so much in recent years about how much feelings are stored in the body, how
Yeah.
much actions and physical behaviors reinforce each other, create patterns. And so if I'm talking and I'm slouching like this and I have bad posture, it's much easier for me to be nervous and frustrated. Or if I'm not stimming, right? Because I'm pretty sure I'm autistic. And if I'm not like stimming and if I'm not like comfortable with what I'm seeing, like if I
Mm.
haven't gone over that with myself, I'm gonna say worse things, right? Like I'm gonna be worse at my job. And like this type of stuff you don't get in a theory book. This
Right.
is not the type of stuff that reading history will teach you about. And I think a lot of people think that the point is to have the right beliefs and the right ideas. Um, and you can have the right beliefs and the right ideas and behave functionally the exact same as a person who is a fascist or a Nazi. You could have the worst and wrongest ideas and be doing things that are actually good by accident, just because
Mm.
like you've been put in a situation where you're moving that way. And so for me, it's been this process of so much just like working with my anxiety, learning how to like express myself differently, not just with my words, but with like my physical gesticulations and like dressing differently and like taking care of my hair and like getting enough sleep. Jesus
Ugh.
Christ.
Don't even get me started on sleep.
Um, like the reason that this conversation can be so, it can appear so long-winded and can feel so like hard to justify on YouTube streets, like, is because it is everything, right? It is a fundamental process of being. And I'm sorry, there's just like no way to have that conversation without without talking about things that are going to be spiritual and that are going to be psychological and that are going to be related to health science and earth science. Um, even just right, like indigenous thought, right, has this is almost by a lot of definitions centered on this idea of like respecting earth as an agent and respecting all living beings as agents. Like just being able to look outside at like the grass and like the air quality and be like, oh, like the earth is in pain. Like I can feel that she's in pain, like she's getting over it, that she's dealing with like a fever. Like just being able to do that puts you in a very different capacity for like understanding than degrowth communism and understanding like um the Marxist concept of oh my goodness, I'm losing, I forgot the whatever, like understanding historical materialism or understanding these things, um like your priorities are different, your feelings are different, and because of that you act differently. um and so it's just what I'm in the process of right now, I guess, to go back to the original question too, is like how do I talk about this without reverting back to, oh, I'm going to just try to like distill this into an essential thing, and how do I incorporate like all these other findings while still making cultural commentary, and how do I make the cultural commentary while still being radical in my views, like, and how do I be radical in my views without being performatively radical, or without being radical only in the sense that it would get me approval from other people who consider themselves radicals, versus actually like communicating something that comes from my community and from my lived experience in tandem from what I'm reading in a book, you know?
Okay, so many good things were said. We have a saying on this channel, like the world is a reflection of us as a whole. And what it has helped me to realize is like my life is a reflection of me as a whole, like what I've put into it. And also it's not a pull yourself by your bootstraps philosophy. It's a level of radical acceptance that allows me to stay calm, in the face of all of the suffering of the world. So, you know, there's so much unwise suffering. And so the question is like, how do we suffer wisely? I remember when I was in my therapist's office years and years ago, and I was crying because the weight of the world was so hard. I was like, I just don't get it. Like, how are we going to save the world? And she was like, who told you to save the world? I was like, I'm a millennial. Everybody did. Like, what do you mean?
Right.
Like, that was like what I was being fed as a kid. Like, you got to stand up against injustice. You got to do the right thing. Like, if you see something, do something. And then I realized, like, well, I'm protesting, I'm marching, I'm cleaning up streets, I'm volunteering. Like, why am I burnt out? Why is nobody doing it? Like, why is everyone kind of drama filled? And why is there drama? Like, why is everyone kind of ugly? Like, I don't get it. And then, you know, she told me that one, you can't save the world. So I don't know what that's about. We got to deconstruct that. And then two, a big part of it was like my childhood stuff. And then something that freed me, liberated me in terms of how I show up for my community now is radically accepting that human beings as an animal species, because I do think we're animals evolved on a planet. Yeah. You know, I believe in evolution. I would say that it's accepting that where people are, so will too there be drama, and that there's a way to accept that without engaging in it, even though it's tempting, because I can clap back too, you know, but I'm trying really hard not to be that girl, even when the opportunity is like so perfect. I'm like, no, like I'm not answering that DM, or no, I'm not doing that collab, or no, I know what this is. You know, I know what YouTube beef is. I know how rich it gets people, but like, I can't ethically do this. And people think I'm crazy. They're like, Brittany, you know, you want to fight this YouTuber. You'll make so much money. And I was like, but just think about that sentence structure. I'm trying to be a less violent person, a more joyful person, more peaceful person. How am I supposed to make this make sense? So something that I've changed in my life, I'm a year and a half in, is I recently went plant-based, but not vegan yet, because I'm still trying to make sure it's embodied before I identify as vegan. And I've been plant-based, and it's just my direct way of adding less harm into the universe to the best of my ability. And it's been a great journey, but I tell you this, I couldn't have done it 10 years ago. I needed to do it now as this human, as this version of Brittany. Because every past version of Brittany, I mean, she dated vegans, she was into vegans. Maybe I could have been a vegan, but it just wasn't right for me. And if anything, my identity at the time was like the girl who makes her own beef jerky. And then I realized like, well, if you, Brittany, couldn't even do this thing, everyone else is going through that too. And that's sort of what my therapist gave me, was a tool to say that like everyone really is on their own journey, just like you are, and expecting everyone to grow the way you grow is just like not how life happens. But it was kind of the way that I was raised. Like I was kind of raised with this idea that you're going to hit this age and you're going to have these goals. You're going to do these things by this time. You're going to have this accomplishment. And when life didn't happen that way for so many of us, I think it felt crushing. Like, was I being overpromised something? But I think what ended up happening was that overpromising was, yes, a part of the systems, but it was also part of the dreams that the systems gave people that did feel soul crushing when they didn't happen. And now, instead of thinking that I was entitled to a dream, I feel like the best thing I can do is remind people that they're entitled to dignity in their life, and then hopefully give them the tools to seek that out, because God knows we're going to die and patriarchy is still going to be here. You know, we're going to die and white supremacy is still going to be a problem. Like we're going to die and capitalism is still going to be here. But the best thing I think we can do, even though I don't think we're probably going to be very famous or like, you know, no one's probably going to remember me at least. I will say that the best thing we can do is do the right thing, even if nobody else is doing it, and try our best to die a good person. Because I think it's going to be really hard. Like I think the world makes it really hard to die a good person. And like, I'll give you an example. My partner and I, we live in Croatia. My partner's Croatian. And we give ourselves a like 20 euro budget a week for fun money. Okay. That's what I get, 20 euro, because we live debt free on a very minimal income, and we were happy with that. But like, you know, we're not making six figures out here. Okay. And so we're just like, we're vibing, and it's really amazing. It took us a long time to get out of that debt, by the way. That was really hard. That was psychologically torture. Okay. So to everyone in debt, I'm with you. I hear you. I feel you.
Listen.
It's hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. I could be in it tomorrow. You never know. Okay. So like, I'm not judging, but we keep ourselves on a minimal budget because realistically, so I go shopping. I'm at the mall. I'm like, I want to buy something, but everything is fast fashion. I'm like, oh my God, everything is fast fashion. So I go on this website to see the like ethical rating of this company. I'm looking at the ethical ratings of these companies, and all of the slow fashion options are like $150 an item. And I'm like, how am I supposed to buy that with my 20 euro a week? Like, how much am I going to save up? 2 months worth? Like, and I'm just sitting here like, man, this is psychologically like difficult, you know? And I think that that's why I'm so empathetic to everybody in this situation. The economy is so bad, but that's why I tell people, like, for me personally, it has to be embodied in my belief that you have to the best of your ability, work within your ethics. And yes, as much as we don't want to buy fast fashion, I just don't know how to do it. Even secondhand, the secondhand options are either similar price, not questionable, all the same, or fast fashion anyways, but like it's still a good option. Secondhand's great. It works. That's one solution. But I think the biggest solution I can give people is like a crazy amount of compassion and patience about these decisions. But I can't tell you how much sleep I lose about buying fast fashion. And I think to myself, like, is this worth that suffering? Now, I would say it is actually unwise suffering for me to think badly and spiral over buying fast fashion. I would say instead to mitigate harm in different ways. But this is like a small example of something that I think is really hard. I don't know about you too. I don't make prescriptions on my channel. I try really hard not to tell people what to do. I try to tell people, like, if you would like to do this, here's what you could do. Because I feel like growing up religious, people saying you ought to do this. And I'm like, yeah, but how'd you come up with that? Like, what do you mean I ought to do something? It kind of triggers my PDA as well. I try to like give people a chance to come up to, you know, figure it out themselves. But I think that is the biggest part of the embodied part is like, am I a fake leftist if I buy fast fashion? And like, that is a really difficult thing to figure out in a world where like, I need new clothes. So, and I can't afford these ones. So what do I do? You know, and that's, I think, the most human and difficult part about being people. So what we do instead is I think we throw in the towel and we say, well, I can't do it a little bit, so I'm just going to go full into capitalism or full into buying fast fashion, or I'm going to get hauls from Amazon every week. And I've been there too. I've been that girl too, who's like, this is too hard. I'm going to go order everything on Amazon and feel good about myself. And I think the difference between embodied Brittany and non-embodied Brittany is she buys the one item. I bought one shirt. And I said, okay, I'm happy with this. This is 17.99 euro. I got 20 euro. Boom, I bought this shirt. I'll keep it 5 to 10 years. And that will be it, instead of a haul, instead of something else. How do you feel about that harm reduction philosophy? I know we talk about harm reduction voting a lot, but what do you think about harm reduction philosophy in that kind of regard?
Oh, it's interesting. I think your point about what you're ready to call yourself and like what you're ready to step into is like important, because when like a lot of bad things happen when you try to push yourself into the direction of, I'm going to be this progressive, I'm going to be this I'm going to be like this type of person, and I want to embody these values, and sometimes we want to embody certain things because we recognize that those things will get us some type of approval, or we feel like we're going to get some type of place, like we'll be the type of person, right? And because of that, it can be quite, it can create toxic things when we're forcing ourselves into a bubble that we're not really sure about. When we're forcing ourselves to take on a specific label, or we're forcing ourselves to take on, this happened a lot, right? With like, there was recent conversations about like biphobia, right? And certain people who are like, I love gay people, or I accept gay people, or whatever, but just don't bring that shit around me. I used to think I was XYZ, but the way y'all are acting, I'm actually biphobic, da 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 da. Like, it was examples of people who were taking on those labels because they were like, well, it's aspirational. If I take on those labels, people will see me that I have those labels. I will feel like I'm a good person, right?
Yep.
And then don't necessarily feel ready for it, right? Don't necessarily get it yet. So then what ends up happening is, for one, your solidarity throughout that period is hampered, right? Your solidarity throughout that period is not quite there, because you're actually not doing it from the right place. But then what also happens is that eventually some sort of force will come around and make you uncomfortable. And in the face of that discomfort, you're either going to say, okay, well, maybe I gotta face this because it seems like I have a homophobic view or whatever. Or you'll do the thing you've already been doing, which is avoiding discomfort, right? And so because of that, right, like you said, you said something to the degree of like, well, we'll die and then, capitalism will be here and colonialism will be here. But I don't think so. I honestly do believe that things are dying. I do believe that colonialism is dying, and I it's the singer for this band, I like, describes it as like a death rattle. Like,
Ooh.
Nelly has described it as such as well.
Like, in our lifetime, though? You think you will die in our lifetime?
Possibly. I think we can't know time.
You're so optimistic. I love that.
But I think it can happen in our lifetime. But even if it doesn't, I think it's important to remember that it is going in that place,
Definitely.
that it is going in that direction, because we have the signs, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not acting the way that they used to act about this. They're not being quote unquote normal about it the way that they used to be normal about it. And that's always a sign of like a backlash or something. Now, people can take issue with that because it's hard to say from the material standpoint, these things are dying, or these things are going to die, they'll be dead in our lifetimes, right? And I also think that forms of oppression, what they do is they evolve and they change, because wherever there is that necessity to have a core irrational belief and then to impose that core irrational belief, there will be new forms with which you can do that.
Sure.
That said, I think a lot of the things we have in front of us right now are opportunities to create the new world. And I talk about this a lot. I use this terminology, like, we're building the new world right now. We have this amazing opportunity, I think, where we can set parameters and we can set up new systems and different systems for whenever the next oppression is built or reshapes itself or maybe dies forever or whatever, like that we have created something that will then help sustain the next people and their next and what they pick up on the struggle.
For sure.
And I feel as though what I feel is that sometimes people think of this as an optimism in spite of rationality, right? People think about this as like, I know rationally we don't actually think we're winning, but we have to believe that we win and hope that we win because hope is good for your brain or whatever.
Sure.
And I don't think that this is the right articulation of it fully. I think it's close. I think that in order to create something, right, you have to recognize it as an ongoing process.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to be in the process of doing it. And so we don't conceive of ourselves as people that are like, well, we're trying and maybe eventually we'll get decolonized. It's like decolonization is happening. What's my role there? What role do I play? And so when it comes to like something like harm reduction, right? I think harm reduction is one of multiple different frameworks that if you apply it in a certain scenario, can or can't make sense.
Totally.
Like some people will use harm reduction as their framework to analyze like why we should vote for Pete Buttigieg or some shit, right? And like that's a place and this is what I think becomes a problem in like a leftist space, for instance. Though I'm trying now at this point to like avoid even addressing like leftism online because it's like I want to actually talk about the thing. I don't want to talk about the group, like the thinking of the thing and like the label that goes with it.
Sure.
But one problem that we have, right? What was I saying? Shit. Forgot what I was saying.
Harm reduction, beat Buttigieg, optimism, false hope. Okay.
One thing that people get caught up in is like, what's the thing? What's the thing? What do we do? What's the thing? Right.
Right.
So the thing is, veganism. The thing. You got to do the thing.
Sure.
And it's like, well, yeah, veganism. I think veganism is an objectively correct position.
Sure.
But I also think that I'm also not a vegan, and part of that is because that's not just something you just do overnight. The same thing. It's like, well, socialism's the thing. Yeah, I mean, communism, socialism is the thing. Can we possibly operate? Like, are you in a space where you can operate fully in that space? Like you can operate fully divorced from the capitalist system? And that's a struggle within the vegan community as well, is that like, yeah, even people who are 100%, vegan in their consumption habits and in their production habits, which I think is a noble and generally good thing. That doesn't end exploitation because like so much of the vegan products that you will consume will be from the same systems of exploitation, and the harm that is being done to animals is to human animals, for instance. Or other animals are being harmed in more covert ways. And so we have to be very mindful of the fact that then if the thing can't be, this automatic, let's just do it, it's done, then the thing can't also be like the one strategy. You have to have the ability to actually rationally process what is going on and then choose the option that is closest to the good or the right. And that will never mean, well, the framework is always direct action, whatever that means. Right? The framework is always mutual aid, whatever that means. It means that in your situation right now, to address this specific problem, what will you do about it? And that's where great mutual aid, for instance, comes from, or where great harm reduction campaigns come from. You can call, like, for instance, boycott, divestment, and sanctions as a type of harm reduction, right?
Right.
It's very effective. Why? Because it's a realistic assessment. And I don't like to use the word realistic, but like it is an assessment of what are the conditions right now. Okay, what's something we can do that can directly harm specific companies from
Mm.
participating in this. And then it's also there's notes about like, well, Microsoft or Apple or Disney are kind of companies that you can't necessarily just boycott, right? But what can you do about XYZ? Or if you
Sure.
can boycott them, can you be mindful about the fact that that is not something that you can produce overnight as a social movement. Um,
Right.
so by doing that, yeah, like I think ultimately, also there's an idea of like moral philosophy, in that we have different language to describe it, and sometimes by what I will call, you know, the maximization of happiness, you might call harm reduction.
Mm.
What I might call, so there's a section in this book that I'm reading, this philosophy book that I'm reading, um, about the rationality of oppression, by Shyam Ranganathan, and it's like
Wait, what's the book called?
it's called um, moral philosophy and decolonialism, the irrationality of oppression. So just look up moral philosophy and decolonialism, um, by someone named Shyam, Shyam
Okay.
Ranganathan, which is Ranganathan. Either way, like
Okay.
there's a lot of words, a lot of letters.
Okay. Perfect.
There's a section in the book where he talks about picturing like a different nations of moral philosophy. That there's a nation Kant where something that is moral, it meets the categorical imperative. And then there's nation positive, whatchamacallit, positive, what's that, utilitarianism, where it's like maximizing happiness. And then there's negative utilitarianism, which is reducing harm, right? All of them, if you think, with what he describes as like thinking like indigenously, or he uses a fancy term called linguistic externalism. But he basically says that the indigenous thinker can look at all of these and say, well, there's just different languages to get to the same description. And at the end of the day, right, if I agree that punching your neighbor is morally wrong, and you agree that punching your neighbor is morally wrong, but you say it differently than I say it, well, we're both
Mm.
kind of getting at the similar thing. And so there's ways that we can talk about the language, but language ultimately isn't inherently meaningful. We give it meaning, and we're set up with different language because of our culture and because of our socialization.
Definitely.
Um, and so that, I think, is something that people struggle with, because that's not what the colonizer does. The colonizer says you have to say it in my language. You have to use the phrase that I say. Otherwise, it's not only is it not true, it's absurd. So if you don't believe in harm, like for instance, like if you don't believe in harm reduction, like you're just evil, or you're just absurd, like you just don't make any sense. And so if I say a sentence like, "Hey, harm reduction is not enough," or whatever, you go, "That's not possible. Like that's just not a thing that can exist." And then you're not able to engage in actually evaluating what we're actually doing. You're just stuck on language
Yeah.
because you have the irrational belief that language is where the meaning is. Exactly. For instance. Anyway, that's a long story short, but that's generally what the conversation I try to have with harm reduction.
Yeah, well, okay, there's so much here that I think this is why we talk about bubbles a lot on my channel, because I'm like, look, everybody has a different perception of what words mean and what clothing means and what we're signaling. It's not to say that it's valid or good, it's to say that it just is. And the question is,
Yeah.
we have to have the discernment to decide, like, what am I viewing? What is this communicating? I always tell my chat, if I'm saying something that you're like, Brittany, that's problematic, just remind me that conservatives are weaponizing it, and I'll stop saying it, because my brain's like, what bubble are you talking about? Who says this? I don't know what this means. But I don't, like, maybe in that moment, I don't quickly have the time to like educate myself in a second. Just tell me conservatives are doing it and I'll do the opposite, because I'm trying to signal, because language is ultimately not just about like what I perceive I'm saying, but how the listener perceives it. And so I will change the way I talk on stream, not to be inauthentic, but instead to make sure that I'm signaling to the right people, I'm communicating to the right communities. And it's taken me a long time to figure that out, because I had to fight the version of me that was trying to be authentic on stream and the version of me that was coming to work every day. And I
Yeah.
think we forget that when we're dealing with people, words and labels change meaning. So I always tell people, okay, your job is to introspect your relationship with you yourself and extrospect your relationship with everything outside of yourself. So the labels you use for yourself and the labels you use with other people to communicate
Yeah.
like who you are, because what we're doing ultimately is we're signaling safety. And I want to make sure I'm signaling safety to the right people, or in some cases, signaling not safety, because you're like, this is not a safe space
Right.
for you. And so I think that takes a lot of education, which is time consuming, and it takes a lot of spoons, which is exhausting. And it takes a lot of like thinking about ideas. Look, I'm very lucky that my special interest is philosophy. I'm very lucky that my hobby got turned into a job. I'm really lucky that I love to think, but I also know that I, more than thinking, I really like to find a solution. And so even with harm reduction as an idea, sometimes when people say harm reduction, I'm like red flag. And sometimes when they say it, I'm like green flag. It just depends on who's saying it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's really you. And then I have to in the moment discern, like, okay, well, when you say it, what are you saying? So I know. And then every debate turns into 3 hours of semantics. Like, what does this word mean? What is this? But I think
Right.
ultimately,
But then semantics are important.
so they're
Yeah.
important. They're important, and they mean a lot. And I think that's the point. Is communication is almost like sacred to me, because it's such a tool of humanization. It's a tool of a dignify. It brings dignity to the conversation, and also people want to be heard and seen. And so I don't take it for granted when there's that opportunity to be like, okay, can I hear and see this person, and can I humanize them in this moment? I think the issue we have, especially with this job, is that we're in a space that does reward like bad faith, and I mean, that's what a grifter is, really, right? It's and I see that, and I think it's our job to make sure, like, even collaborating, like, every time I try to collaborate with people, if it goes wrong, I take a break for a long time and then I come back. And this is me coming back, like, in a big way. I'm like, okay, I'll reach out to more people. I'll talk to people. And look, I think it will go well. I think like your content seems really consistent and good, but there might come a time where you show up to stream and you use words that I'm like, uh-oh, or I show up to stream and I use words and you're like, uh-oh. And then we're sitting there trying to decide, like, wait, is this person safe to collaborate with? Are they safe to build community with? So this is what I tell people, because when we do talk about other leftists, I try to say this to people. Look, if it's a march, I think we're all there. If it's a collaboration, maybe not. But if it's a march, easy, I'm there for you. Is it like,
Right.
like I will never not march on the same side as the people that I'm on the same side as. If we're anti-fascist, let's all show up. But that's different than dating, hanging out with, making friendships, inviting them over. Like, and the question is, well, what's the difference? Because if you're embodied leftist, then why wouldn't you be safe to be friends with? But I think that's a little bit reductive to say that our politic or our philosophy is enough to embody our childhood trauma, our family associations, how we, come across in private. And I think that's what people are missing. Those are the tools I want to give my audience. And the reason I wanted to talk to you, because I think like my work, I'll speak for myself, is so personal, but it's not about my life directly. It's just my life gets talked about. But I don't do vlogs. I don't do family vlogs, but politics are so personal because everything is political, that what happens is when I bring philosophy to it, which is my focus, I don't ever want to pretend I'm a political creator because I'm not educated enough to do that. But as a philosophy creator that talks about politics, because obviously I have to, it makes sense. What we're really asking is to humanize the process of incorporation. So like you said, it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that happens over a span of time, which means if it's going to take me a while to embody this belief, how much longer is it taking everybody else? So I wanted to ask you a question as it relates to, this is so weird, but this is a question I've been mulling over about embodied values being sort of a privileged position, because often on my channel I get asked about introspection being a privilege. Totally. The time to meditate alone is a privilege. And I also think like it's even a privilege to be a leftist in a sense, even though like we're kind of punched down on. There's somewhat of a privilege to see the world in like such a dignified way, in a sense, like such a beautiful way to look at people and actually like value them and not think about taking away their rights. Like, I don't live with the anger and bitterness that I see in so many people. And I'm like, wow, what a privilege to have left that part of myself in the past. And I've been thinking about that in a sense. And I wonder if that's why conservatives often feel like we're snobby, except to say that the irony is sort of like, I don't ever want to be snobby, but I also want to say that like, man, you're really hurting people so unnecessarily. And it's like,
Right.
how do we not bridge that gap with Republicans or conservatives? I don't cater to those people, but instead, how do
Right.
we reassure in ourselves and our fellow leftists or philosophically leftist people? How do we reassure in each other? How do you do it with your audience? I do it through radical acceptance, to accept that you are weirdly in the most marginalized position and the most privileged one philosophically. Do you have any thoughts on that? Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have a multiple. I guess in a way I have a multifaceted approach in terms of how I think about like leftism as a privilege.
Mm.
But like my first response is to first like I understand exactly where you're coming from because
Mm-hmm.
it's not a new day for me if I get a comment that's like you're talking down to me, or that's a comment that's like you're pretentious, or
Yeah.
these kinds of things you receive a lot, especially from people who have a disagreement. If I'm saying something in my chat, right, and I could be talking for like 20 minutes, not noticing the chat, and then all of a sudden I look in the chat and somebody's just like been raging because not only do they disagree with me, but they feel the way that I'm articulating myself and the place that I'm coming from is hostile to them because it's like
Mm.
I think I'm above them, I think I'm better than them. To some degree that can't be avoided, but I think of it also as not necessarily a privilege either, in
Mm.
the sense like I mean, leftist is a term, right?
Right.
It's just you might not call yourself a leftist, but have all the values, or you might do all the work, right? If I've seen people like that, I know people like that in real life, right? But all you can do is work with the information that you have in front of you. All you can do is be responsible with information, right? That's another phrase that this philosopher uses: being responsible with your with information. It's not about having the right beliefs; it's about being responsible with information. So, if I, as a perfect example of some way we know this intrinsically, and objectively, you know, if I was friends with somebody, and then you came to me and you were like, you don't know me, but like this person actually has bullied me for a long time, and then he's your friend. Um, I could be like, oh, that's wild, and then have to make a decision based off of it. But it wouldn't be if I felt really bad about it. It wouldn't be fair because I didn't know.
Mm.
Like, if I didn't know, and there's also conversations about like how willing are people to try to avoid looking. But if I literally was living my life trying to see things and then I just didn't see that somebody did something bad because it wasn't in my purview, or I didn't understand what that meant, etc., like what that action was harmful, it's not right for me to hold like anger at myself, or like to hold like a negative view of myself, in the sense that I was wrong about it, because at the end of the day I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know. Like, I'm just using an abstract example here. I don't want it to be loaded,
Mm.
but we do this all the time. You did something bad a few years ago, you tell me about it, you say you feel a lot of guilt about it. I'm like, look, you didn't know, you thought it was the right thing to do at the time. If you did, or I ask you, did you think it was the right thing to do at the time, and you're like, I really did, I genuinely did. Okay, so then now you know. um and this is, I think, what the difference is, right? It's not a privilege to try to do the right thing based off of what information you have available to you.
Mm.
That is just what we are supposed to be doing. And that's why, like, some of the things that we conceive ourselves as being so privileged and educated to understand about the world are things that a poor person down the block has understood since they were 2 years old. Like, or like an indigenous person has understood because their family has understood it for generations. And so, is it privileged to understand, for instance, what settler colonialism is? No. What is a privilege is how many chances you get, or what is a privilege is, how many opportunities that you get to further your understanding, for instance. I see you were coughing, I think. Um, moving right along. Don't worry about
Oh
it.
my God, I'm okay. It's water. I drink water wrong.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It happens to me all the time. Once a
Oh my
day.
God.
But yeah, the reality is that a lot of people aren't being responsible with the information that they have, right? And we have to ask ourselves why. Like, they know that it's not okay to bully somebody because of their being trans. They know it's not. They know it's not okay. Okay,
Right, right.
unless they are at such a unique position to where they wouldn't have had any access to understanding what it means to hurl slurs at somebody. Like, this is why children indoctrination happens, right? Like, if
Mm.
somebody is 5 years old and their parents have just been drilling them, be uh be Islamophobic, right? And then that
Mm-hmm.
kid just sees the Arab person and starts hurling Islamophobic insults at them. Like, they have not had the opportunity to even know what that means. They've just been their training, right? But 99% of people aren't that. Like, people, if you're 28 years old, or you're 29 years old,
Sure.
and you have the internet and you go on it every day, you've had many opportunities to understand that that's wrong, as well as your personal life experience to know what it feels like to be in such a position, in different ways, to be in a marginalized position, perhaps in many ways. So, um, what I would say then is that sometimes people, because I think what we're dealing with a lot of the time is people that just struggle with the discomfort um and then they struggle with the discomfort of being wrong, and then they struggle with the cognitive dissonance that they have created to try to avoid that discomfort. And that's what our conditioning, that's what it means to have been conditioned, right? We've been
Mm-hmm.
conditioned not just because we're wrong, but because we've seen that we're wrong in some way, or at the very least that we very well could be wrong in an important way, and then we've instead put all of these layers of filters on top of it to avoid seeing it because it makes us uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
um so I think because of that, like, I don't think so much about leftism privilege, even though it can describe some real things. I think just more so about, like, okay, do I really believe what I'm saying?
Mm.
And if I believe what I'm saying, and if I know it to be if I know certain things to be true, then in a world like this, you will be punished for being right and for saying things that are true. Because most people are trying to not do that, and that's what social conditioning and systems do. um and so I'm grateful for so many things, um but in terms of my own, like, moral compass, I'm grateful to myself for that, in the sense, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
not even my egoic self, but I'm just grateful to be alive and to be able to keep seeing my moral compass and to keep wanting to see it.
So, okay, just so I can kind of understand, because this intersects with a couple of other thoughts that I see in chat. I see you chat. You're saying
Yeah.
POC don't have the privilege of ignorance. I think the dilemma with that statement is that it insinuates like POC can't be ignorant, but like, have you met my parents?
Yeah.
Like, have you
Yeah.
met like, a lot of the Assyrian community? Like, again,
Right.
ignorance is such an idea. So the idea of like, am I more privileged than the Assyrian community who hasn't deconstructed patriarchal frameworks from their life, or their homophobia or transphobia, or am I less privileged because I'm in a community or from a community that, well, I'm not in the community as often because it's not safe for me, but like, I love them and I would defend them against anybody. Don't you dare talk bad about them, And at the same time, I know my community has problems. So then it's like, what privilege, how does my privilege of knowing more? So this is how I think about my privilege of knowing more. I have a rule of running ahead of the group, gathering information, coming to the very back of the group and pushing everybody forward. That's how I
Yeah.
utilize my privilege in the community of knowing more. Instead of abandoning, instead of saying, well, sucks to be you, losers, I swing
Right.
back around. Because the idea is like, I can't wait for you guys to figure it out. I got to come out of the closet, but I'm going to come out of the closet and I'm going to make sure to always give you guys a path forward, because that's what I believe about the world, is that it is my ethical obligation to help my community. And it's my ethical obligation to help anybody who needs the tool. So if I have it, I should give it to somebody. And so when I think about privilege in that way, I think of the privilege of knowing more puts me in a position that gives me the opportunity to then be, I'm going to use the word very loosely, a teacher, maybe? An educated person that people come to for advice. And then all of a sudden, I'm being put in this position where there's like a hierarchy. So going back to what you said earlier about seeking validation from the hierarchy, even if it's from other leftists, then it creates like this hierarchy in our brains of like, oh my gosh, like this product leftist thinks I'm cool and I got a validation in my work. And then this, and all of a sudden we're doing it again. We're recreating the thing that I thought we were trying to get away from. But I also think, was that an animal? I heard a sound.
That was a door. I'm sorry. We have creaky doors.
That was a cat. That's hilarious. Well, I used to think
there is a cat, but yeah, she's
that's
quiet.
cute. Oh my
Sorry.
God, love. Well, I used to wait. Hold on. Now I lost my train of thought. Hold on.
Knowledge, teacher,
Hierarchy.
hierarchy, reproducing
privilege.
thought, approval, leftists.
I don't know, but I'm going to connect it to being a YouTuber. So like, I think about that,
okay.
and even being a YouTuber, like there's like this automatic like pedestaling, and I'm like, how do we get here? And it's just because I turned on the camera. But there are people in our communities who will never have a camera, who are like so important. They're staples to the community. They're doing so much real life work. They're doing so much more work than I've ever done, in so many ways. But because they don't have the camera and the username and the face and the brand, they get like less of the credit. And maybe that's a part of the point too, though. Like if you're out there really doing stuff, why do you need the credit? Okay, so this goes back to what, hold on, I gotta go back to my notes. Why do I need to convince you, right? It's an attachment. It's like, if this was really real, why am I convincing you? This is why I tell my audience, be very careful of how you want your creators to show up. Like one of the things people are always telling me to do is like to write a book about a very specific, I'm working on a philosophical framework. They're like, write a book. Listen, if I write a book, it's contradictory to the framework, because the framework is saying no hierarchy, no attachment, no nothing. But if you write a book, then all of a sudden you're putting the attachment to the book, which you then would want to sell. And then you would want the credit of selling the book. So if I sold a book for a different reason, I think that'd be more valid than selling a book off this system that I'm just creating to help people. Like if I turn it into my, what I mean, my main income, then it's like, it changes the relationship I have to this tool. And I want people to understand that like the privilege I have is to also have the lack of attachment to the success that the world is telling me I should have in order to gain the validation, and therefore the success to be somebody who did something more than make a YouTube video. It's like the world is always telling us, be more than the thing you're doing instead of be better at the thing you're doing. And I think that goes for everyone who's working any job, showing up in their community in any way. We feel bad about ourselves for just being a teacher, as if that's like not super important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As if like being a good parent or a good sibling or a good family member like isn't like super, super life-changing important. Like the job of a good sibling could I mean, years of good or bad paths could be influenced by a sibling, And I think that that's connected to this, all these hierarchical beliefs we're trying to dismantle. And so when I think about giving tools to my community and I think about how I show up here every day, I do think about ultimately that this isn't a just chat show, that ultimately I'm not trying to be your friend, that ultimately I am trying to come to stream and say, hey, I learned this thing, I read this book, here, use it, and like go home and use it, make your life better, but make your community's life better. And I think that comes from a point of privilege, and that's what I was speaking on more, because I do hear you I agree with everything you said. I don't think that I think the privilege to which I am speaking to, and maybe it resonates, maybe it doesn't, is the one that allows me to, as an example, I'm heading into a burnout week. I just know it. And so I'm trying to not be on stream when I'm burnt out because I say things I don't mean, or I say them in ways I don't mean. And you wanna talk about language? I don't have the spoons to be sophisticated when I'm low on spoons. So I'm taking next week to recoup, but I have the privilege of taking that pay loss because as YouTubers, it's not like we're going to get paid. So if I take 4 days off stream, that's it. Like I just have to forget that money and pretend it didn't exist. I can do that.
Yeah.
I can do that because I just have me and my partner to support and our cat, and like we can figure it out. We'll figure it out. Not a big deal. That is a privilege, but I'm also okay by engaging in this privilege, signaling to my audience it's okay to take a day off. Because I think sometimes when I was back in my 20s, I would feel so guilty. I would work myself into the ground. I would work myself into a therapist's office. Like I would think my value as a person was based off my productivity, and taking a day off was crazy. That's why when I look at these really prominent quote leftist streamers who never take a day off, I'm like, how is this leftist to never take a day off? Like how does this not? And then the way people come in my chat, they're like, Brittany, you wish you could be them, but they don't even take a day off. You're always taking a day off. And I'm like,
that would,
and talk about the intersection of disability. Like we're all disabled. Like I think these streamers are also, they have disabilities. They just get to have a different relationship with their disability in terms of brand. So it's, it's interesting, but I think that's the kind of privilege I was speaking to mostly. Does that resonate at all? Does that make sense?
I think there's, I think at least parts of it. I think
okay.
For me, I don't like, even with the way that we were talking about with Leo Skepi, it's like, like I don't want like I don't consider, and the reason why I think I noticed some people in my chat talking about like the idea of privilege versus responsibility, like the idea of privilege can sometimes be misleading for me, is because like from the material sense we emphasize privilege, but like I wouldn't want to be in a white guy's position.
For sure.
Like if I had, like when I describe having a privilege for something, it's like, wow, like I'm sitting at this lake, it's a lovely day. What a privilege to be able to revel in, in God's creation, whatever, right? Like, what a privilege. This is something I would want for anyone. This is something that we can share in. And this is something that I think has a purity to, right? Like it's something that, like, I wouldn't want to be in a position where I have more material resources because I have more money, at the expense of my own dignity and my own integrity. I wouldn't want to be in that position. It's not more fun to live in. And I think because of that, you can also reframe the break taking as a responsibility.
Sure, definitely.
One that's just like, look, I don't care that YouTube says I should stream every day. It's not responsible if I don't feel like I should stream, to force myself to do so because I need the income. At the very least, it is a tenuous place that I have to acknowledge I'm gonna be in. There are times where I've gone, it's like, okay, I gotta work and I don't really want to, but I gotta do it.
Sure.
And I acknowledge that. And I tell the chat, I'm like, hey guys, this is gonna be a slow one, right? You know what I mean? This is gonna be a 30-minute short presentation or whatever. But I have a responsibility to abide by my own integrity. I have a responsibility
definitely
to live. And if a person can stream every day and doesn't truly get tired and is consistently doing something good, maybe they can. I can't do it. I can do one stream a week for about 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
But that said, yes, most people can't do this. Like most people are not in a position in which they could work, which they could do this work. Most people have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs. Most people have to do much more manually backbreaking labor. Most people very difficult and exploited positions. And so I recognize that I am more materially like advantaged than they are, but I hesitate sometimes to call it privilege because it's not a good thing. You know what I mean? Like it's not good that I have this and they don't.
Sure.
And sometimes, for the example of like I'm at the lake, it's a good thing to be able to enjoy nature, and to be able to just be able to enjoy in something, and that is a privilege to be given that opportunity. Um, but the language of privilege and opportunity in a capitalist system is one that um, that contains within it the capitalist framework of, well, some people get opportunities and some don't. So for instance, like a person gets in the door at a company, you have the privilege of being able to work at Saks Fifth Avenue, and this is an opportunity that you have, and somebody else will want it if you don't. I think that sometimes is the logic that we embody more, and we are thinking out of, even when we talk about things like from a leftist perspective about privilege, because it's like, yeah, like it's like I don't it's like the idea that to work at a company, for instance, should be an opportunity, should be like a privilege, rather than something that you need to do because it was just it was what made sense for you to do in order to get the materials you needed, and et cetera, et cetera. That I think is why the privilege framework can sometimes be difficult. That said, I'm at a point where I'm just, again, like I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for like the bad things for me. I'm grateful when I'm wrong. I'm grateful when I mess up, or if I don't mess up, or if I feel like, but I feel like I'm being, if I see a comment and I feel like it criticizes me unfairly, like I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that anger, and I feel like, again, like that's what you get to that place when you've gone through so much period of time, like undoing that conditioning, that you start to realize like just to live authentically as yourself is like this ultimate thing, and then that's the place from which you can then help other people. What Brittany Simon does is like unique to Brittany Simon. It's a position that Brittany Simon's been put in, and to be like how happy Brittany Simon is to be Brittany Simon, right?
Yeah.
And for me, if what I do, if living authentically means that I don't, and if thinking through things and what I could perceive to be, I guess, a decolonial way, and if pushing this message doesn't get me very far, what a wonderful thing to be to have the experience of being a person that flopped on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think I see. Okay, I think there's a disconnect, just for the sake of my brain, where there's the privilege in the material sense, and then the privilege in the philosophical sense that I think is playing out differently here. So not the privilege of like, when I think of like the privilege of being introspective, I think of the privilege of knowing yourself. Like I think even being happy is a privilege, but it's a personal privilege. It's like a like sitting by the lake. It's that kind of a privilege. Like, and I want that for everyone. I think everyone deserves that. And I think that's why we're aiming to dismantle these systems. So not that people have the privilege of being a CEO, but that people will be a privilege enough to become elders in the community and grow old. Like being autistic and being queer, like growing old is like always the main goal for a lot of our communities. And then maybe even when we grow old, to be an elder in the community, somebody who can like pass down knowledge versus just growing old, I guess. And so I think of it very like almost like spiritually, or almost philosophically, when you mentioned earlier about the indigenous framework of like seeing the earth as its own, like basically agent. This is sort of incorporated into even why I've decided to go plant-based, which is like, yeah, like we are animals on a planet. We are a part of this biological ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. So how do we have a deeper relationship with that experience? That's my goal, is how do I have a deeper relationship with this experience? And then how do I, contend with this idea that like, it is a privilege to be a YouTuber, but also, I mean, the struggle is real. I wouldn't recommend it unless like you are willing to not know if you're going to get paid next month. But also like a lot of people have that struggle in their regular jobs too. And then on top of it, like a lot of neurodivergent people, disabled people find themselves in this position. Like there's a reason why every streamer is ADHD autistic. Like
Yeah.
it's so prevalent that at this point I'm like, can we not see a correlation here between people not being able to get regular
Right.
jobs and ending up streamers? And that's because there's
Yep.
something about that. There's something about, but still, even being successful at this is really hard. Like it's not what I would recommend necessarily. But at the same time, once you are successful, now you're in this privileged position again. It's really weird. It's like getting here. I always work 2 to 3 jobs to get here, right? And even now, I have 3
Yeah.
streams of income because I can't just make my AdSense isn't enough.
Yeah.
You know, so like I have to have like, but at the same time, being successful now, yeah, I get to work from home, huge privilege, or I get to do all these things.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think there's like a humility that is required in order to seek wisdom, which is also required, and that takes you have to be out of survival mode, I think, to get there, which is the hard part. So that's where the material privilege comes in, because it took me a long time to say, okay, Britt, we're gonna put our therapy on a credit card. Fuck it, we put everything else on a credit card. Let's put therapy on a
Right.
credit card, girl. And it saved my life. It really was a life or death situation for me. And that saved my life. And I was like, okay, got it. That plus therapy, of course, or therapy plus philosophy.
Yeah.
So, okay, saved my life. Got it. My therapist even told me, I told her, I was like, okay, girl, here's where I'm at. I'm successful in all these things. I'm not happy. Here's my life. I'm not happy. And if we don't figure it out, I'm gonna peace out. And she was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's make your life something you don't want to peace out of. I was like, great, let's do that. Because I'm dead serious, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do it.
Right. Right.
And she really gave me some really amazing tools, which was very helpful. But it even took me a few years after going to therapy to even start incorporating those tools, embodying those tools. And that's the irony, is like, it's not like it overnight. It still took me so many years to like, okay. And then slowly it started to become a thing to make me the person that I am today. So this is why I say to my audience, like, not only is a slow burn, but the relationship with privilege changes. So like, yes, you might feel it's a privilege to introspect, and also know it's like a joyful privilege as well to have that relationship, to have that quiet space with yourself, to say to yourself, like, what do you really think about this though? How do you feel about this? How are you doing today? And to have it be meaningful, and then turning that meaning into an embodied philosophy that ends up creating your place in your community. Because I say to people, like, I know that saying, like, I don't dream of labor is so reasonable when we're talking about capitalism and everything. I like to incorporate a secondary part of it, which is to say, like, I would love to labor for my community though.
Right.
I would love to show up for my community though. Like, I don't want to labor for capitalism, but I would love to labor for my people. And that feels different to me. That feels about, like, that's a philosophical joy versus engaging in this philosophical evil of engaging in capitalism and selling merch and being like, hi, I'm an influencer. Buy this thing on TikTok Shop because I have to pay my bills. It's like, that's a lot, you know? So I think I'd like to meet those 2 points, because I do think I hear what you're saying. I do want to clarify though. I'm thinking more of like a philosophical privilege, more so, but I think they relate. I think they're completely inseparable, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's language, right?
Yes, it's exactly. It's language. And so that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I was watching your stream the other day, and I was thinking to myself, all the things Elliot's saying is like very relatable. It's exactly what my stream and I've been talking about. Like, I want to make sure I'm not wasting anybody's time when they click on a stream.
Yeah.
That your time is important, but not in a productive way, in a more like, I don't even want to capitalize on everyone's time. The reason I don't stream for more than a few hours a day is like, if you're watching 8 hours of Britney, who else are you watching? Who else are you reading?
What else could you be doing?
What else could you be doing? Like, I need to be a part of your day. And not even every day, girl, honestly, but like, I need to be part of your day, and you need to go watch other people and read other people and hear other people's opinions. And I think that that's a big part of how I show up for my community, in my own way, sort of. So like, okay, I think we should aim for wrapping up soonish, because of my spoons.
Yeah.
But I wanted to leave you I'm trying to think of like what we can leave our audiences with that would be a good and useful tool, that would be something nice they can take away today that would be helpful to them. We didn't pre-plan this, so this is just off the cuff here. But something that I think would be helpful. To be honest with you, I know this sounds really silly, but it took a lot of guts to reach out to you.
Oh.
Because I'm so socially anxious and intimidated by DMing people, and maybe there's some tool in that even if your anxiety is spiking, send it. Worst case, they don't look at your DM and don't respond. But look at this nice thing that happened because you did see it and you did respond. So maybe the tool I can offer the community today is, within reason, you can send an appropriate, message or email or apply for a job or talk to a friend or start, join a collective or volunteer. I got that question the other day on stream asking me like, how do I start volunteering? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Something like this. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I think that's always it's always a central thing. And whenever I hear somebody in my audience, for instance, be like, your videos helped me, reach out to somebody. They helped me confront a friend for something that they did, or they helped me start a book club, that's when it's like, oh, okay, so I'm not just doing not just talking, like we are actually in community because I'm actually still having an effect that it transcends the thought, that transcends the thinking part of this. So what I would leave my audience, what I would leave your audience with, and our audiences with, I think it's hard to pick something that isn't what we've been talking about since things are top of mind.
Yeah.
What I would say though is like, it is to. So I had this thought about God or something. I had this thought about basically one of the many ways in which these kinds of struggles happen in this space is because there's this great antagonism between people who are spiritual or religious and people who are more atheistic or agnostic. And there's this struggle about like, can you do the spirituality in a secular way? And I see that there's more people that are doing that, that are trying to be like, look, there's something here, and we can do it while also being extremely scientific, and do it without being, without falling into religious doctrine, for instance, or without falling into, what people might call delusion. I think though that I imagine myself talking to sometimes like I'm a pretty agnostic person, but I have a lot of spiritual stuff that I kind of am interested in or practice, because for me it's not about belief. It's actually about rationality. It's actually about what's rational. And I think I have the question that I like to ask is, if there was a God and a God was real, so to speak, like, what would that God see for you? And if you were, let's say, if you were God, what would you want for you, the human, to do? Like, what would you as God want, think that your place was as you, the human? So if Brittany Simon, were God, what do you think rationally as God you would be like, but this is what I want Brittany Simon to do? And I think that this helps when it comes to like the quest for meaning that I think people have, but it also helps for, sometimes we have to situate our consciousness, since we have to change our consciousness in order to change the material. We have to also then take our consciousness out of solely what is socially situated. We have to ask ourselves questions that go beyond everything, because otherwise we get stuck. I don't want to be stuck in 2026 American society as like the way that I think. I don't want to be stuck in 2026 like social media brain as the way that I think. And so asking ourselves larger questions, even if and honestly, because we don't have the beliefs, right? Because we don't actually believe in God, because we might not be Christian, because we might not be, it's even more important that we then ask ourselves those big questions from the rational standpoint. And there's a creator that named like ASMR Enya, who has like a really cool video about like why I do all the spiritual stuff even though I don't actually believe in any of it, because it's really not about belief. It's about what is rational for me to do with the situation that I have in front of me. And sometimes the rational thing for you to do is to pray, because rationality ultimately is like, again, responsibility with information. And I think it would be ascientific and reactionary and irresponsible for us to confound whatever scientific knowledge we have, to confuse that with us actually thinking we know everything. Anything that any good scientist knows that we don't know most things, and there are some things that are perhaps unknowable. Quantum physics and da 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 da. Right? I'm not a good scientist. I'm not good at science knowledge, but you know, there is so much that is unknowable, and because of that, how do we remember that and then operate accordingly? You know?
Yeah, I love that. Do you know who Britt Hartley is by any chance? No nonsense
Yeah,
spirituality.
no nonsense spirituality. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, she's great. She and I have collabed as well, and she kind of incorporates a lot of that into her work as well, which I really love. And I really love that because as an atheist, I do consider myself spiritual, but it's not about me believing in it so much as me engaging in the ritual of things that I think really helps. I meditate. You can call it prayer if you'd like. Like, you know, I have my little tarot deck. You know, I try to incorporate tools from around the world as well, because I do think like everyone has something to teach us. And I think that that's a beautiful, like, I really love that. It's kind of like the little exercise I do with myself. Like, what is 10 years from now, Brittany going to be really grateful that I do right now? Like, what can I do for her right now? That in 10 years, she's gonna be like, thank you so much. And like, I love this idea of like, what would God want for me, especially growing up Catholic. I left the church really early at like 19, but that idea of like, what would God want for me is also interesting. Growing up with this idea that God does want something good for you. It's like, does he? Yeah. And like, if he did, what would she want for me? And it's like, okay, that's interesting. I love that. That's great. Thank you. I love that. Now, was there anything else you also wanted to talk about? Anything we didn't get to talk about that you'd like to cover just before we really head out?
The one thing I guess would just be like, I find it funny when you have the Gen Z millennial conversation, because me and Nelly have those conversations a lot. It is a driving thing when we think about. It's just like, man, what's up with these millennials? You know, I'm like right on that cusp, and Nelly's more firmly Gen Z, and we're both kind of like, we see a lot. Obviously, generational discourse has its limits, and there's plenty of people that we look up to who are millennials and also boomers and also Gen Xers. But like this dynamic that's like seems to be occurring, where everybody's like, Gen Z is stupid, you know. Gen Z is conservative. This is why Gen Z is a purity culture.
Right.
And is that happening because it just sounds correct? Like, why does it sound so correct to people? And why don't people hear themselves? Because if they heard themselves, I feel like they would hear that they sound like their parents.
Yeah.
Instead, they think that they sound like radicals, I think, when they say this.
Have you seen me rant on my Gen Z rants? Like, is that why you're bringing that up, or is that totally random? Okay, because this happened with the voice note guy. Yes. This happened with so many of the discourses. And I think what happened, this is my theory at least, is that, okay, millennials were raised by conservatives, so they went super liberal and they thought they were liberated. And then Gen Z had enough information from boomers and millennials and liberated millennials to then kind of engage more with like leftist philosophy, even if they didn't understand it fully. And so what I think about this with sex scenes in TV shows, people say Gen Z doesn't want to see sex scenes in TV shows. I think Gen Z doesn't want to see high school rape scenes anymore. Like, I think we're over it. And I think we don't want to see power dynamics. And I think, like, even as a millennial myself, when I'm watching stuff, I'm like, was this necessary? Like, I love a healthy sex scene, but like none of these are healthy. All of them are bad and predatory. Yeah. And so I do think there's like this misunderstanding that Gen Z, even if they don't have like the best understanding of it, I think they were raised in a completely different bubble than all of us, that they got to be outraged about things that we should have been outraged about. And we didn't get it. Like, what was that girl's name that was canceled for saying build the wall when she was young? She tweeted it, like, build the wall. It was a blonde girl, I think. Guys, anybody? Schaefer something, maybe? Oh, I hope that's the right name. Anyways, that reminds me of this, where they were canceling her for saying build the wall. And when I was younger, build the wall was like basic conservative stuff. And then I was like, how beautiful that Gen Z is calling that shit out as racist. How beautiful that they're not taking it for granted, because my generation certainly did. We just thought that was like a normal thing you said. And then I was like, I'm so proud of them. But I think millennials really struggle to see that Gen Z partially learned faster than we did because they had the tools we didn't. And two, they're just disconnected from them. You know how many millennial people I watch that go, I never watch Gen Z stuff. You're missing out on so much. Like, you're missing out on the culture. Young people are always ahead of the curve, even if they don't have the wisdom, they have the knowledge. And then I feel like older people are supposed to have the wisdom to learn the knowledge, and we're all supposed to make a circle together. That's my hope. But yeah, I think Gen Z hate is like a complete misunderstanding of what's really happening in these bubbles. And I do think like hating on Gen Zers just feels cool or cathartic, but it has no bearing. I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't. I'm not a fan of it. Yeah, but I'm an older sister too, right? I have 7 younger siblings. Okay. So so I'm getting a lot of input. I'm learning a lot from them, and I get a viewpoint that I don't know. I'm so grateful for younger people doing all of the things that I can't even tell you. Millennial living was like a different planet. Like, at least mine was. It's so different than these kids.
Well, it was. I do think the planet changes. I do think the world changes.
Sure.
I do think that the world has ended many times, and I do think that certain worlds have ended, and now this is a new world that we live in that I think a lot of times folks are not wanting to admit. You know, like the same thing that you say in 2012 when it's said in 2026, it doesn't have the same meaning. Because again, language is not inherently meaningful. It is given meaning. Right. It is a political terrain upon which things are settled. Yeah. So, yeah, this is a fascinating conversation about generations that I will probably touch on at some point soon again. Because I want people to. My dream world is truly where younger people inform older people and older people inform younger people, and we actually like work together to help each other build something. Because I just think like we have different insight. And it's all valuable, hopefully. And then we can exchange that valuable insight. But I would be nowhere without younger people telling me, Brittany, we don't say that anymore. I'm like, my bad. We don't say that anymore. Or Brittany, like, no, this is this new thing. Like, if I didn't have younger people in my audience, I would not be where I was today. Like, I require younger people helping me out as much as I require learning from older people. So yeah, shout out to the kids. Shout out to Gen Z. Gen Alpha. Exactly. Like, if you can't learn from people, then they won't learn from you too.
Exactly.
So it's like,
I want it to be an exchange.
When people know that you'll listen to them, then they'll be like, oh, maybe when they make a point and disagree with me, I'll listen to them.
Yeah. No, well, I think that goes back to a level of humility though that is a requirement of wisdom. Like, I work every day to have the humility, and my audience knows I don't do well with transitions, but they're so patient with me when I'm like, okay, guys, you're telling me this thing. I'm pretty upset about it. My body is fighting against it. I am recognizing my biological experience is very upset. Give me a second. I will transition out of this. I promise I will work on this. And they do. They stick around. They see it happen. They watch me in real time. And I'm trying to be very compassionate to people because I think I think it's hard. I think it's hard to be a good person, but I think it's possible. And I think it's something you work on every day. And I think that even that concept of good is subjective, but the line in the sand is really where it's at. Where is our line in the sand for what requires you to be a good person? And are we even meeting that threshold? And everything after that is just an attempt to do better and do less bad. You know, when I say, okay, one last thing, you know what I tell my audience, Elliot? I tell them, stop trying to be a good person because the road to hell is paved in good intentions. Try to be less bad every day. Harm reduction, whatever that's. If you spill something on the kitchen counter, wipe it right away. If you come home and throw your shoes on the ground, but tomorrow you's gonna regret it, pick it up for them. You know, whatever it is, smaller. You know, because we all have stuff to work on, but you can't change the bad you did by doing more good, because you still have to make amends for the bad you did.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Exactly. My last thing that I'll say is that apparently Dolly Parton passed away while we were having this conversation.
I know. My chat's telling me.
Chat's telling me as well. So I might. There was a clip that I was watching in the stream where one of these conservative white gay men was mentioning, like, this is what I learned from Dolly Parton. And I hope that. Well, I wonder if that killed her. I do wonder if that.
Sir.
I do wonder if such an appropriation.
Ma'am. Well, hopefully, rest in peace, Queen. Right? She was one of the good ones, or no? Was she one of the? She was one of the questionable. She was one of the good ones,
people
right?
Generally like her.
Generally like her.
Yeah.
I think she did.
Generally.
She was. I think.
I mean, she wasn't like a communist, but like.
You know, you can't all be perfect.
She was pretty. Yeah, right. Well, Brittany, it's been great.
It has been great. Thank you so much. Reach out anytime.
Yeah, I absolutely. It was great to be in contact with you. So
Thank
we'll
you.
definitely be in touch.
I appreciate it. Okay, have a great day.
You too. Enjoy your break.
Thank you. Bye-bye.